So, Josh, today I'd like to pick your brains about chords and chord grips. I love the way you use kind of jazz grips in a blues context. I'm not sure if you're a jazzer as well. We've never really talked about that, whether you're into like playing straight ahead bebop and wes and that sort of thing as well. But where do you find your chord grips? Have you spent a lot of time making them up? Have you got any tricks that you want to share? Where do you start for chord study?
Just like with all the guitar for me, it starts with blues. So, for me, rhythm guitar was an essential. Not just chords, but rhythm guitar in general was something that like older players drilled into me as a kid. You gotta be able to handle your job. As the member of the band, not just a soloist. So it was really important to me coming up, and then when it came to finding a vocabulary playing rhythm guitar, for me that I can narrow down into like really specific guitar players that meant something to me, and I kind of took something from each one to find like my rhythm voice and my chord voice. The most important thing for me was when I started listening to blues and kind of obviously hearing the shapes that you're used to. So if we're in A, obviously like that A ninth chord, this shape was really important when I first learned that, in a regular seventh chord. But the big one for me was this chord, this little sixth, like A6. So when I heard, jump blues guys and West Coast guys playing, and I realized it was as simple as just playing that chord and lifting your middle finger to get the 4 chord. It was big for me because I was able to do all the little things I was doing in between chords because of that chord, because there was no movement involved. You know what I mean? So I started to hear all those double stops that guys were playing. It was all like really simple, coming from that shape. So that's where it started for me, was trying to figure out ways to like manipulate that shape. So I would hear Robin Ford play stuff a lot like that. All these little fills in between the chords. He would even play.
How are you using that?
Yeah, so it's literally, I'm just sliding that chord. It's like a minor third.
The major pentatonic.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm going up a minor third, and then a whole step.
Oh, it's like the little finger is. The first finger's on the minor pentatonic or the blues scale.
Yeah.
Sorry, the third finger. Sorry, your root note.
Yep. That's it, basically. Yeah. So I heard that. He would whatever. You could do it on the 4. Same thing. So I started to be able to, the same way I would build up these licks, not just with like the notes, but like a muscle memory in time, where you can shoehorn these licks into things. I would do the same with rhythm guitar, where I on a shuffle like that, I knew I could break in. Stuff like that, and I would use that to kind of connect the dots to other positions and other chords. So that opened up a huge world once I found just that chord and the ability to move that, almost so easily between 2 frets and 1 finger difference. You know, that was
Did you discover that grip at the same time as the moving, like the same shape becomes a ninth chord when you move it back a tone and all of that?
Yes, yeah. At the same time, because I remember hearing, um, uh, what was this the I'm trying to think what the tune was. Might have been like a Curtis Mayfield tune. It was like something like that, or like Cornell Dupree with King Curtis. He played. Stuff like that. So I would hear that, and then I would hear Stevie Ray play like on Empty Arms. So it was like, wow, okay, he's going from a 6 to a 9, and it was like, okay, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it really helped me kind of start to build a vocabulary inside the blues. It was mostly just about being able to kind of come up with little patterns and things like that. So I found all these little things I would do to help me lock in with the rhythm section. So sometimes it would be like, I'm guilty of playing this one quite often in a shuffle. We all have like our own little thing. So I'll go. And I would just sit there and come up with little ways to kind of break it up and play those things. Like Kirk Fletcher, I had never played when I first met Kirk. He he plays that one a lot too, but he plays this a lot, and it was one I'd never did, but he plays it all the time. Same thing, same feel on a shuffle. He'd go. And it's like the same kind of thing. But it really helped me develop like some pocket with my rhythm playing. So I was working on stuff like that, and then I was also like working on, soul and R&B guitar, which was the same kind of thing, the same pocket, but with flourishes and double stops and slides and stuff. So then I started bringing those things into the blues playing, and that's when you started to get all that other stuff. All those little awesome things, all those double stops. So a lot of that.
The double stops are mostly sixths, correct?
Yeah, a lot of the times, yes.
Yeah. And it's kind of, I don't want to make it sound more complicated than it is, but it's kind of Mixolydian-y things, right? So like
absolutely
A in the key of A.
Yeah,
that's the kind of palette.
Yeah, well, and for me that's directly attributed to soul guitar, to Steve Cropper and Cornell Dupree, So Steve Cropper would be playing all that stuff, but it's brilliant stuff. So like I've said this one before, but it was really big when I learned "Soothe Me" by Sam and Dave. He would play "Soothe Me, baby, soothe me." And it was all those little half-step moves and double stops and licks in between the notes. That was big. And then Cornell Dupree came along after that for me, and hearing him play double stops like in a prettier way, that's when you started to get into major seventh chords and other chords and stuff. So he would play like Rainy Night in Georgia, or the intro is. Right, so he would play then the verse. And that was
You've got
big.
that exact part, like totally memorized.
Exact. I'll never forget it for the rest of my life. Yeah.
Wow. I had the Randy Crawford record stuck in my car for ages, like a tape stuck in my car. So I know that record. And as you play, I'm like, dude, he's like, it's not like in the style of, that's exactly the part.
It's exactly the part. Because, so he was a bridge to me between like the earliest blues guys and R&B guitar players and jazz cats. And he was also like a bridge on the session where, you know, he was doing all these sessions and all these big records. So he influenced like all the guys that came after him, especially like Larry Carlton and Robin Ford and these guys. So like when I hear that part, it's literally when I heard Larry play with Joni Mitchell after that, you know, which is in the span of time only 15 years different, 10 years different or whatever. But to me, I was hearing it all, you know, it could have been the next day, who knows. But there's the Joni Mitchell song Help Me from Court and Spark, which is just E major 7 to D major 7 instead of D to C. And he goes, I mean, and he's playing all that stuff. But to me, he's just playing Rainy Night in Georgia. He's just doing a few different things, you know? And, yeah, I kind of drew the lines, like especially in rhythm guitar, like, in a way that I didn't do so much when I was studying lead, was like I really just was trying to, like, follow along how it kind of progressed through the blues and the R&B world, you know?
But how far did you take it going back? Were you, like, checking out the Robert Johnson style? Because a lot of that stuff is the simplest seventh-y thing and sixths again, from my limited understanding of it. But they're less chordy, but he still plays a lot of melodic elements within the chords. Well, it's not just chunking a chord. There's melody involved.
Well, if you've got it, yeah. So I was listening to Robert Johnson and Son House. Lonnie Johnson was really big to me because he had a jazz vocabulary. He was a huge influence on Charlie Christian and T-Bone Walker. I think he gets overlooked by a lot of people. So when these guys were backing up nobody but themselves, they had so much freedom. You know, they knew what they were going to sing, so they would answer themselves, you know, and play stuff. So when they're playing, you know, simple blues. You know, they kind of, even if they didn't know what they were doing, they kind of built up this whole shorthand for, you know, how to kind of back themselves up. And that carried over once it became an electric thing. Once guys started playing in bands and backing up a singer, and especially backing up a harmonica player. Like once Muddy Waters and these guys started playing with Little Walter and stuff, you really started to get you know, a kind of form to the way that these guys would play rhythm. So you would get a guy that would play. And that's the rhythm part. It's really busy and melodic, you know. But you'll get another guy just going. Stuff like that. And you would have kind of these two guys playing. One guy would play all these low notes and melodic stuff, and the other guy would play the chords. And that kind of became like the basis for, Chicago blues rhythm guitar. And I think, yeah, that directly came from kind of splitting up the chores of what the one guy would do when he was playing by himself. You know what I mean? Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
absolutely. So did you? How did that trace through into that soul and blues things? What were the join? How did you join those dots?
Well, I was just kind of following along, so learning, so for me, there's a big difference too between Chicago blues and then like Memphis blues, which was B.B. King and T-Bone Walker. So when I started working on B.B. King and T-Bone Walker, then you start to get into sometimes a few more chords, right? So you would have sixth chords, you would have seventh chords, you would have sometimes major seven chords if you were lucky, but you would definitely have like 13 chords, stuff like that. Because T-Bone Walker, he would play.
Hmm.
And so I was kind of learning that vocabulary too, and bringing that over into like more straight shuffles and stuff like that on straight blues. So you could use those 13th chords. So sometimes when I'm playing that sixth grip, I'll play a 13 instead, and I'll connect, play those type of little grips that I would get from soul guys. And all those type of grips right there, like playing slash chords for the first time and things like that. That came from connecting kind of the soul guitar with the blues guitar. And then then you find Jimi Hendrix and hear like what he's doing with Curtis Mayfield's thing, and it kind of everything just kind of melded into this big ball of guitar.
I've just realised there's this funny gap in my blues chronology, which is a lot of those guys like T-Bone Walker and B.B. King, they make the changes. So they're always playing out of the chords, not just
Absolutely.
minor pentatonic. But the blues, in a most basic level, the way most guys learn it is minor pentatonic over the whole thing, and then they graduate later to making changes. That seems to be the most common path. So where did it suddenly veer off from where people were making the changes all the time to people just noodling out of the minor pentatonic? Do you know where that is? Did you trace that? That's more of a lead guitar-y thing, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I mean most of the guys make the changes even in the minor pentatonic. You know what I mean? They're just targeting notes and landing on the 4 and the 5 and blah blah blah. But yeah, there was like listening to Lonnie Johnson is one where it's like I think guys don't realize how far back some of these people were really making the changes, and I don't know, when it changed. I mean, obviously, a lot of these guys, not a lot, all of these guys were learning by ear, pretty much, and on their own. Some of these guys would pick up a guitar and learn to play it in a tuning that they made up because they didn't know what was right, what was wrong. So that's how you end up with Albert King playing upside down in C sharp minor, or having Albert Collins play with a capo and E minor tuning, and things like that, like because they didn't know any different, and they just kind of found what worked for them. And
it's kind of beautiful, actually. That
it's amazing, it's amazing because everybody found something different, and I think that's one of the most interesting things and most frustrating things about blues today for me is that you have an entire, just treasure trove of this history of music, and yet you have all these guys who have dedicated their life to, being like historians, which is great. You need to respect the music, preserve the music, but then there's all these guys who that's all they do is try to play exactly like this stuff, which is not that exciting to me because it's not a museum. Like this music is supposed to grow, and it's super not honest either because those guys when they were doing that, that was like completely honest. That was the best of their ability. You know, we can. That's not the best of what we have all this knowledge that we've learned from listening to them. You know, and when we try to just dumb it down and do it exactly like Otis Rush did it or Johnny Guitar Watson, we're doing a disservice because they were pushing the envelope and doing the best they can, and we're not doing that if we're just trying to copy them. And that's a frustrating thing in the blues world that I've been dealing with my whole life. Of this unwillingness of people to kind of get past the history, and let new things happen. Well, it's the same thing in jazz where you had jazzers not like bebop when bebop came around. And then once things went modal, you had bebop guys. Oh no, that's too. Bebop is real jazz. And it's the same. I mean, there's jazz now modern jazz now that I don't really dig necessarily to sit down and for myself, but they're pushing the music forward and doing something new. So it's like I would never not respect it. You know what I mean? Even though maybe if I'm going to listen to jazz, I still prefer to listen to bebop. But. That's yeah, it's a weird thing.
So how do you moving a bit further forward with chord stuff? So we've got the ninth chords, the sixth chords, linking them up, the influences from the older things.
Yeah.
What are the chordal influences that you've got from the more modern stuff? So listening to, because you're hip to bebop and modern jazz as well. Are there things that you've drawn from that? Do you ever think of making jazz changes in a blues? Is that something that you're doing, adding a 2/5 to get to the 4 chord and that kind of stuff?
What's funny is the soloing drove the rhythm for me when it came to that. Because I was stuck in my little box of blues, and I think the first time I learned a 2/5-1 as like a target turnaround to a chord, not just replacing the 5 in a blues with a 2/5-1, but like actually just using a 2/5-1 as a tool. It opened my ears to like, oh, wait a minute. This is what Freddie Green is doing when he's playing. And it was like, oh wait, that's that thing I've been working on in my solos, and it was this exact thing. It was me going from the 1 chord to the 4 chord, and I played just a like E minor arpeggio to an A major arpeggio to voice lead me to D, right? And it was, oh wait a minute, that's this, and it was all like this major. Ding, 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 ding moment of, okay, so I can do this in a shuffle, like. All those type of little, 2/5s in between every chord. And then I started realizing, wait, if I combine that with all my little half-step stuff, is when I kind of started to find what I was looking for, I think, in rhythm was like adding those 2/5-1s in, adding different changes in. So yeah, I started to become obsessed with like figuring out Freddie Green, not necessarily exactly how he played everything, but what were some of the ideas he was using to in these simple chord changes, in a blues or in rhythm changes or something like that. How was he kind of he always had to have a chord every beat, you know what I mean, or something like that. So what was he doing to fill it up? And that's when my ear started to be trained to hear like that thing on a blues where you're on the 4, halfway through the 4, sometimes you go to a diminished chord. And then maybe go to the 6, you know what I mean? And all those types of things. Or halfway through the 4 chord, sometimes I would hear a minor 4 chord. But maybe I would hear it in the soloist. See, like. And that kind of drove the me connecting the dots like that. And then, you know, more chords started to become involved. You started to get major 7s in there. You started to get, sharp 9s and flat 9s and things like that, and augmented chords and alter chords and, flat 13s and, blah, blah, blah. But those were just new. Every time I kind of heard that, they became just ways for me to connect the dots more. It wasn't so much like, oh, this is some great new chord. It was like, no, this is a way for me to get from one chord to another in some new way,
Did you have any sources of places for learning chords? Like, I've always felt that I struggled to hear transcribed chords if I didn't kind of know what they sounded like already. Like, there were a few books that I bought, Joe Pass chord books, where once I'd learnt the shapes, then I could start hearing them and transcribing them. But before that, before I'd actually ever played them, I struggled to figure out the kind of the way they were gripped. I don't know. Do you have any places where you found a whole mine of interesting chords to?
Well, explore? Yeah. One was when I heard Robin Ford say, "Oh, every chord I ever learned was from the Mickey Baker jazz book, first page." Yeah. And sure enough, I bought that book, and first page is all the chords that he plays all the time, And so that one was one. But yeah, I used to get stuck in a rut where, when I first learned like a major 7 chord, it was only this grip, that started on the 5th string, So I didn't know this grip, I didn't know this, or I didn't know this. I just knew this, and so I would get stuck in this, if it said major 7 and I needed a B flat major 7, I knew I could only play this one, you know what I mean? And it took me a while to kind of break out of that. And the only way I did that was by, for some reason, I couldn't get that out of books. Like, it was hard for me to get inversions from books. I couldn't like, I had the Ted Green chord and chemistry book, and I had all these other books, and it would be, a page of B flat major 7 chords. And for some reason, I wasn't, as a kid, it wasn't connecting with me. I had to like see somebody play it. And I had to like connect it to something, a song I was learning, or a solo or something, and I don't know. So for me, it started slowly connecting the dots like that. Yeah.
And it's probably better than people learning like loads and loads of chords out of a book and never actually knowing how to use them.
Well, yeah.
Much better to have a few chords that you could use than lots of chords that you can't.
Well, like the Hendrix chord, it took me a million years to realize that the same chord from Purple Haze, was a chord that was like really important in jazz, and then especially if you flatted the 9, it was like, wait a minute, this is that chord I hear all the time. Like, wait, that's that sound? Oh, okay. It had to be like applied for me to kind of hear it. You know what I mean? I had to hear somebody do it, or I had to hear a song. Even like as silly as, Stevie Ray Vaughan playing, Lenny, and he would play, that's probably the first time I played that grip. Which would become really important down the line and things like that, Or I know Riviera Paradise was absolutely the first time I ever played a minor 9 like that. was the 13 again. I knew that one already, but I'd never played that. And I remember it not only being important for that reason, but when it got to this chord, he's outlining a D minor 9, but it's an F major 7. And I was like, wait a minute, I know this. This is just relative major, you know what I mean? Relative minor and major. And that was big for me to kind of realize, oh, wait a minute, he's playing D minor over F major 7. I get it. You know, like, I remember that, like, vividly as a kid. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I think those kind of... I've often struggled to try and explain that to students, because I've got a feeling that it's better off making that connection on your own, because it ties lead lines and chords all together. If you realize that a D minor 9 is the same as an F major 7, it works as a chord, but it also works in the harmony and the licks that you use, and that you suddenly, the places you can use all of those licks is expanded incredibly.
Yeah, dramatically. Like, it was such a big moment to kind of learn. That was when also I realized, oh, he's not making the changes on this tune, you know. And it was so like, whatever. Sometimes it just works to play blues, but it was when I finally heard, wait a minute, you could play a lot more on this song than what he's playing in this tune. And it was when I realized that, like, wait a minute, he's playing. That's not just D. That's F major 7 he's playing right there. You could play a bunch of stuff with that chord, you know. Yeah,
absolutely. Chord movements. Anything? Did you ever specifically practice trying to do like one chord per beat or whatever, and move from between them to find new ways of getting from one chord to another, realizing that there's a A7 going to D or A7 to D, looking at all of the different ways that you might be able to move from one to the other. Is that something you specifically practiced on its own, or you always tried to keep it in a song context?
No, I did practice that, always kind of in that shuffle context. I was always trying to come up with ways to connect just that shuffle feel. So I could get stuck I wanted to be able to break out of... It was really driven by, I wanted to be able to break out of soloing anywhere I was and return to that feel no matter where I was. You know what I mean? So if I'm playing that chord and I start soloing up here, I had to learn that grip, which I didn't know yet. You know what I mean? So I started to find, you know, that I could play, stuff everywhere. So to me, when I learned that grip, it was big, because then I could do that to get to the 4. So I could start connecting even more dots, like with fills. So if I started down here, I needed to be able to kind of go wherever I was, you know, and that helped me a lot with soloing too, because it was like once I started to see chord shapes everywhere, I knew I could bust out anywhere and play, you know, at least around those chord shapes in my solos, you know. And I'm not a big chord shape guy in my soloing. Like, I'm not always looking for chords. I'm more just kind of thinking about, you know, where I'm at in the changes, but it does help to kind of, you know, be comfortable enough to know, you know, you've always got... I mean, I think that's something we take for granted on guitar, you know, that maybe we overlook sometimes, you know, that, this thing starts over twice on each string, and then you got 6 of them, you know? So it's like you've got everything everywhere no matter where you are. You don't ever have to move if you don't really want to, you know? It's like, even if I'm playing... that BB King thing there, and I want to play that 2/5 that I'm playing to get to the 4 chord, but I'm here. You know, I got to be able to know that I can do it anywhere. You know, those types of things. And that was, the rhythm helped me start connecting those boxes, because then I knew I had it everywhere, you know. And yeah.
Do you see the scales and the chords all kind of connected, so that if you're here playing in A, doing those kind of BB things, are you kind of seeing that around the A7, kind of the C shape, whatever, this A7, or are you seeing a pentatonic box, or what's the kind of the framework where all of those things live for you?
Oh, well, there, when I'm in that position, I'm seeing a pentatonic box for sure. Whatever. Kind of seeing that you know, third position pentatonic.
Yeah, yeah.
But I started to connect it to chords, because I wanted, like I said, to be able to break out of chords right into soloing no matter where I was, but even more importantly, break out of soloing no matter where I was into chords, you know. Because maybe I wouldn't start playing rhythm up here. I would always start in my happy zone here, you know what I mean? But if the solo ended here, just so I could have the ability to kind of drop that stuff wherever I was. It was almost like, you know, when it's your turn is done, you got to drop wherever you were at and pick your job back up. And I that was important to me, like wrap up your solo and get back to the rhythm job, you know. So I wanted to be comfortable enough to do that. And then yeah, I would then just start taking all those little tools I'd worked on forever and connecting all the dots together. So those little half-step moves and things like that, the slurs, the moving up and down in scale term, you know, with double, all that stuff. So it all was driven. It was like I wasn't drawing a line between rhythm and lead at that point at all. It was all the same to me. It was like I need to be able to do that just in all contexts. Connect the dots, build movement, you know, whether I'm in the rhythm section or whether I'm soloing, it was all the same to me at that point. Everything was kind of just blurred together.
I've got to ask as well, your rhythm, your right hand, the way that you're playing this shuffle.
Yeah.
There's some extra special shit going on there that I don't like. I know what it is. Like I can intellectually see, oh, he's doing the shuffle pattern like that. But there's the feel, the pocket or the groove is just so strong that you could be playing the simplest chords and it's still going to sound killer because the groove is super.
Yeah.
How have you worked? Is that just a practicing, playing it on the bandstand, working on it, or have you?
Yeah.
Is there something that you're doing specifically that helped that along?
Well, again, everybody kind of finds their own thing, but for me, that was something I worked hard on in my bedroom to make it feel as good as it could feel just by myself. You know what I mean? I was really, really, what's the word I'm looking for? Not obsessed, but it was important to me that I had some pocket, but that I had good time. And I started to realize as I got older and I was around different groupings of players. So you would go from like schooled musicians to straight up blues guys to somewhere in the middle, guys who played in school but weren't professionals, or, you know, whatever, guys who knew a little bit of theory but also there were, you know, there's all these different tiers of musicians and how they come up and what they learn. I started to realize you could have really good time and the shit would still not feel very good, you know. or vice versa. You could have terrible time, but it could feel great, you know, because it wasn't all about a metronome. It was about kind of, you know, finding yourself within the band. So I would sit there, especially with that shuffle feel, and sometimes I would play just mute and not play any notes, and I would work on. And when you hear it like that, it kind of sounds like a Sam Cooke song or something, like you know, working on the chain gang. Huh. Ha. You know what I mean? It has that. Ah. But it's this.
And you're doing some real fast little down picks as well in there. It's not just straight up and down. So you're getting the la da 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 in there.
Yeah, and there's that slur. So, and there's a snap, like. Like I'm exaggerating it there so you can kind of hear it. But that's kind of what I fell into, at least what worked for me, was kind of doing that. And I think that came mostly from listening to, you know, yeah, obviously to B.B. King and to piano players would play a lot of that. You know, I like a lot of that sound where everything is a stab, where the notes ring at the same time instead of a strum. You know what I mean? And that's a piano thing or an organ thing. So in an organ shuffle, I would hear a lot of that. Whatever, you know.
You're keeping it together, even though now you're doing picking fingers and picking out little grooves.
Well, once the
feel is still there, it's like it's stuck in your arm somewhere.
Yeah, no, it is. It's totally stuck in my arm. Well, and once the hybrid picking thing came into my playing, I started realizing, I could approach that chordal thing even more like an organ player or a piano player. So, like if I put on the Leslie and do that. All that stuff. You know, I started to find kind of ways to play that with my fingers and come up with different things. And yeah, but that feel was ingrained in me quickly because I worked on it. But I didn't just work on that. I worked on all sorts of feels to kind of get that pocket together. So I would sit there and work on things like James Brown type stuff, like. Now that was one of my favorites as a kid, that James Brown song, and it never changes. So I would sit there and work on those things until it felt good in my bedroom, just me by myself.
Just you by yourself, or you playing along with the record?
No, just me by myself. Yeah.
Okay.
I would work on those grooves. I would work on Motown type grooves until they felt good, just me by myself, like stuff. You I would just beat that feel into my arm, into my head, into my foot, so that I had that just where it, ready to be whatever, to be brought out. That
And we're
feel.
talking like by yourself with a metronome or without a metronome?
No
Nothing.
metronome. No, just by
No
myself.
metronome.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I wanted to build all that internal clock where I knew, if I'm playing that simple chanks, that I had, I could play. I could go over the bar line. I could connect dots. I could, work. And that was really what I think helped me make my pocket. Was working on things that way. The same way, when I learned new licks, it was always over that same shuffle feel. And to this day, when we hang up and I close the computer screen, I probably will sit here and just go. It's always, I'm never practicing just going like licks, It's always in time, tapping my foot with something happening, some groove, some changes, something, Yeah.
It kind of defies the traditional approach to teaching that sort of stuff, though, is that the importance of the metronome is the metronome is supposed to help us develop that internal time feel and give us that sense of what it is. But you've developed it super strong without that. So it's like, I'm not sure that conventional wisdom holds, how strongly it holds up.
I don't know. The metronome, I'd be lying if I said I ever practiced with one. I never did. Ever.
You never did?
Not in my whole life, no. Not when
Wow.
I was learning scales, not when I was learning the beginnings. It was not something I did. I remember the first teacher I had was a young guy who had just graduated from University of Miami, a jazz guitar player. But he was really young at the time. He was, probably 25 years old or something. He had just finished school at 24, something like that. And Italian guy. And my parents found him in the, like not the yellow pages, but the newspaper, classifieds. Just, guitar lessons. We went to his house, and, it sounds stupid saying this out loud, but after the second lesson I had, this is my second ever guitar lesson. I'm 6 years old. They said he pulled my dad in after the lesson. My dad said, "Well, what do you think? How's it going?" And he goes, "No, he's great." And he said he has better time than a lot of adults that I teach. Like he just has a clock. I can tell. Like he's got a good clock. I think time is a weird thing. You're born with some time. You've got like this time that you can feel it or you don't. And I know where my limitations are in time. And when things get slow, I rush. When things are real slow, songs, I want to push. That's my weakest link. But on like anything kind of straight or grooving or up tempo or swinging, I know I have a really good internal time. Like I have a good meter. I can make things feel good, but also stay rock solid. And so it's weird. I mean, you only get that from just so much repetition and practice, and you start to learn when it's okay to drag or when it's okay to rush, and when to follow the drummer and when not to, when you got to pull him back down to life, back down to earth because he's rushing and those type of things. There was a drummer that I grew up with who's still around in South Florida who was hard on me as a kid because we would play songs. It's funny, it's a Hendrix song, but in my mind it was was like like playing a Motown song. You know the Hendrix tune "Stone Free"?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was one of his first songs. So, so the drums, it's kind of Motown thing, you know what I mean? Like Four on the Floor, and I was really struggling with. He was getting on me because that right hand, I wasn't with him, you know, on the snare, and he told me I needed to listen to more Motown, you know, and so I did. I listened to more Motown until that felt good, you know, and I that song, I remember that song, yeah, because there's. And then he goes. Yeah, yeah, but that was like a Motown tune.
That's a great track.
Yeah, really great. Isn't that the first thing he ever tracked after Hey Joe? I think it was the second song.
I don't know. I've played it in bands as a teenager, but I haven't played it for probably 20 years.
I think that's the
years.
second song he tracked with the Experience when he came to London. He did Hey Joe and they tracked that. Yeah.
Amazing. Great call on the groove part of that as well. But that's it, yeah. So it's interesting. So there were points where you specifically worked on an element of the groove to lock it in, even if your general time was solid and you felt confident with it. There were still bits that you'd kind of drilled.
Yeah, because I would hear these guys play that stuff, those fills, in between the chords, and it was like it all never lost its propulsion. You know, it still felt good. And that's a difficult thing to do, especially if like you're in a trio situation where you're the only guy chording and you want to, play fills and stuff without letting the groove fall by the wayside. And yeah, Steve Cropper was so great at that stuff, and so was Cornell Dupree and all these guys, and so was Curtis Mayfield on that Impression stuff. It was just amazing. The way all that stuff. To be able to break up the beat or play behind. They were able to kind of not lose that feel, even when they went to play a fill, or even when they left it for a second. You never lost the feeling of that heaviness of the pocket and the groove, and that's important.
There's such a mystical thing there of people being able to play so late sometimes that it's almost out of time, but it feels amazing. Like, how does that work? Like, how can you do that? But it's just like falling into stuff. The Rolling Stones are great for me. Keith Richards does these things where it's like so loose and floating, but it's still beautiful and amazing.
Well, the magic,
kind of bordering.
The magic to that is when not everybody is doing it. When somebody is behind and the rest of the guys are straight. You know what I mean? Yeah, like when you listen to the Stones and you hear, whatever. I mean, they're getting that stuff from old rock and roll, from Chuck Berry and Little Richard, right? So Little Richard's playing stuff like. Right, where he's but the drums are swinging while everybody else is playing really straight over the top. The drums are doing that. And that's like the magic kind of thing that, yeah, everybody talks about the push and pull of, rock and roll and somebody swinging and somebody straight. But that really is what makes the difference. And what's interesting is now you have everybody wants to be so behind the beat because of, the neo soul thing and the D'Angelo stuff where everybody's so far back. But when you really listen to Voodoo, Questlove is not laying back. He's right on playing drums. He's swinging, but he's in time. And everybody else is pushing it as far back behind the beat as they can. But he's straight. And I think people don't realize that as much, that it's not everybody. Because if everybody's doing it, then nobody's behind the beat. You're all together. You got to have a beat to be behind. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, now we're almost out of time, but I've got one last question, which if you can't think of enough right away, because it's an awkward question, you can pop me an email later. But can you give me 10 examples of incredible blues-based rhythm guitar grooves that people should check out in order to expand their own vocabulary? Like just songs that have got such killer. You've given us a few examples during the lesson, but
yeah,
songs that we should all go and check out and listen to and study to try and absorb.
Yeah, BB King, Blind Love for a shuffle feel.
Okay.
Little Walter, Shake Dancer for how to play behind a harmonica.
Okay.
And those listen to the two guitar parts, how they balance against each other for the Chicago thing. Any T-Bone Walker, but especially, it's cliche, but listen to Stormy Monday to hear the way that he's filling in those chords on a slow blues, you know what I mean? And then listen to the Bobby Bland version of Stormy Monday and hear where Wayne Bennett took it further, and built these pretty chords up together, played all those chromatic things to connect chords together. Another important one in blues that we didn't even talk about because it gets overlooked is the ability to play things like this as rhythm, like a box. Right? So listen to Junior Wells and Buddy Guy for stuff like that. For shuffles where you don't even play any chords at all the whole time. Like... stuff. It's really simple, but it's amazing.
Yeah. Your video just froze in for a second, but I've got your audio, so I can chuck it. It'll be fine to get together. But who was that last example?
That was Buddy Guy with Junior Wells. Yeah, but
I get a Freddie King vibe on that as well. That single line thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, Freddie King had that vibe going on, and he never played any rhythm guitar in his life, but he had that sort of thing in all those instrumentals where he was playing rhythm and solos at the same time, so kind of like. Yeah, he definitely had a way of building up where he was playing, at least hammering home like the downbeats and things like that.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking of stuff like Tore Down. Isn't that a similar kind of riff to that there?
Oh yeah, Tore Down as a box, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Same sort of.
Yeah, absolutely. What else? Other Junior Wells ones would be good, like Messing with the Kid, for like a syncopated thing with. I mean, right? Like it's simple stuff, but if you can make that feel good, listen to Albert King, you know, Crosscut Saw to get that. It's like that. All those types of feels are important. Listen to Otis Rush for, you know, minor blues, like All Your Love I Miss Lovin', where he would play. You know, that's All Your Love I Miss Lovin' by Otis Rush.
Yeah.
That's a good one for those types of things.
I only know that as the Beano album version. I don't think I've heard the Otis Rush one. I need to check that
out. Yeah. Well, that's Otis Rush. You got, I mean, note for note. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Man, well, look, that's been amazing breadth of stuff that we've covered today. So thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it.
Of course, man.
Plenty of things to work on for the next little while. If you think of more tunes, drop me an email with a little list and I'll add them up on the website and stuff. Yeah, thank you so much. Incredible.
Of course, man. Of course.